Game 5 between Tom and Kasun. Looks like it's a big Spell Mage up against Miracle Rogue, which, you know, Miracle Rogue is supposed to be really good against those control decks, and without Ice Block, it's become a lot harder for Big Spell Mage to guarantee its results against those Miracle Rogues. I don't know if we see any history. I think you have the Battle 5 bracket over.
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up right now. It might take a few seconds.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, the opening hands definitely look good for Tom. He has an ability to fake Big Edwin or the Hand Clan Thug and pressure in with Cold Blood. But there is a lot of single target removal with Polymorph, Meteor, Voodoo Doll. So that should be able to answer threat for threat. And the big question is, can Big Spell Mage last long enough to get to Jaina with the Death Knight and ultimately close out the game through inevitability? And Arcane Keysmith, also a really powerful tool too. Definitely an underrated card that I think a lot of people didn't necessarily expect very much out of, but fits so well into Big Spell Mage, considering that you can still get secrets in your deck without having to dilute it for Raven Familiar and Dragon's Fury.
Yeah, I think originally people kind of flirted with it in the Secret Mage, the Aggro Mage, just for, you know, the consistency of getting counter spells and extra explosive runes out. Explosive runes in particular, like if you drop a Keysmith in Aggro Mage and just get free explosive runes, it's so insane.
Right.
But the failure rate of exactly, thank you game, for demonstrating exactly the point. Like the failure rate is there, right? So in an aggro deck is generally built to be very, very consistent. The deck is built on percentages. These are the cards that I draw. This is how likely I am to pick up a curve, and my deck does a very similar thing over and over again. Whereas a control deck has a lot more flexibility in play like that, which makes Arcane Keysmith a much better fit for a control deck such as Big Spell Mage than it does for aggro.
Well, check this out. A really good pickup by Kasun. Just having Spellbender, recognizing that Cold Blood's one of the biggest threats out there. And with Polymorph being used, Tom might have used this as a cue to try and make a big Van Cleave, but without double Cold Bloods for pressure, that might make him reevaluate what he wants to do in this position.
Yeah, Tom, quite rightly, his instincts just immediately said, okay, Big Van Cleave this turn, because he knows that it's roughly Dragon's Fury o'clock for the Big Mage, right? So he wants to make that big minion come down. He saw the Polymorph get used on the Hench Clan Thug, just paying respect to that threat early on. So it seemed like the perfect time for the Van Cleave. And yeah, despite what looked like a huge whiff with the Keysmith options, the Spellbender pick has thrown a real spanner into this turn for Tom, but just goes ahead and commits the Big Edwin turn anyway.
There's Voodoo Doll. There's also Meteor, which happens to line up beautifully with everything. And this is where Miracle Rogue struggles in this matchup.
He could have just traded into the 1-2 and then kept a 2-1 on the board.
Yeah, that was actually just a loss of the minion straight up.
Yep. He doesn't even seem to realize. Normally, like, mistakes like that, you see the face immediately afterwards. Just go, oh, what on earth did I just do?
Right.
But yeah, that was messy.
Yeah, it would have been free 2 damage, essentially, to the Rogue. But in the end, Miracle Rogue doesn't win based off those small damage edges. They usually win very convincingly.
Yeah.
And this is also another reason for Tom, by the way, to utilize those Cold Bloods.
Right.
Given that Skulking Geist is in the deck. So now that we've kind of seen some parity, I feel like, you know, Big Spell Mage has survived the worst of it, unless a big Auctioneer comes out, because all those early game threats have been checked. And there's still a lot of follow-up removal with Arcane Artificer, so it seems like Big Spell Mage can maybe just ride one threat wave. Well, in this case, there's a Vile Spine Slayer, but the moment he picks up Frostwitch Jaina, I think that will be the beginning of the end here. So Tom has a very small window to make this work.
And we saw in the history that the Skulking Geist did pick up a hallucination, destroyed a hallucination from Tom's deck, which he used both Cold Bloods, as you correctly pointed out. But that hallucination is a tech that's come in quite recently, not one that I particularly like. Because of what I mentioned before about, you know, the games being defined by really powerful cards like Hench Clan Thug and Thundery Strider, I prefer personally to run more copies of like Shiv and Fan of Knives so I can find those very powerful cards that I have in my deck, as opposed to just going for, you know, more random effects and extra value like you can get from Hallucination. I will say Hallucination is a much better combo activator than any of those cards.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big upside is pretty much the mana discount. You know?
Right.
It's you have the opportunity to essentially high roll your opponent by getting some ridiculous outcome like Pyroblast. You know, but
Sure.
I generally think that having a 1 mana activator for combo effects is probably the biggest reason why.
Yep.
So with Flame Strike being used, Tom has, you know, Faldo or Strider here as an opportunity to maybe get in some extra damage, and a lot of AoE has been used already. But, I mean, Kassoon has Raven Familiar, so even after the Dragon Sphere, you can still pick up more AoE.
And Tom there choosing to Vile Spine the 1-2 as opposed to backstab it could potentially get punished for it. There are some big threats in the deck remaining that he might have to deal with, but I think he knows that his hand very low on value here. He basically had 2 options there. One was to Shadow Step the Faldore and just load up on 4/4s in the deck, and the other was to keep both 0 mana spells and just trust the Auctioneer to appear in his hand at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if his opponent plays Sindragosa or Baron or anything like that, he could Shadow Step it. But right now, things are looking very grim as the big Spell Mage, which has been under fire for basically being either underrated or overrated, is now starting to really press in for the victory.
I am very much in the overrated camp, by the way.
You think
if
so?
You were curious, yeah. I'm not a fan of this deck whatsoever, but what do I know? It's doing great work here for... Oh, Tom does pick up the Auctioneer.
Right, Sap is really big too for Tom on the Sindragosa, given time. And 2 Flame Strokes have been used, right? So in his mind, he has a chance here.
Leroy Shadow Step now as well, yeah.
So the save on the Shadow Step is going to pay off here if Tom can finish off this game. Second Gadget Stand for more gas if he needs it. But double Eviscerate has been used too, so the burst, I think, from Tom's deck is strictly limited to this Leroy Shadow Step.
Yep, the Cold Bloods were used, and even if they weren't, the Geist came down, so he wouldn't have them regardless. So yeah, just that Leroy Shadow Step. Dragon's Fury gonna wipe this board. Another legendary minion is gonna be picked up. Lord Godfrey. Wow.
That'd be great, Big Spell Mage. Interesting. Explosive Runes and Vaporize both have case here.
Yeah, I like runes. I'm not sure what was picked, but I personally would have favored the runes there, because not only do you get insurance against Leroy that way, you also get insurance against second Auctioneer, which are kind of the 2 things that you lose to in this position. But turns out that it wasn't runes.
It's Vaporize.
Yeah.
You know what's actually pretty hilarious about the Lord Godfrey is that it's so good in this position. Holy crap. All right, well, he picked up Blizzard anyway, so he would have been fine. But still, though, oh my gosh. Not many big spells left to draw here. I think that Blizzard and 1 Meteor is all that remains in that deck. Kind of surprised that Kassoon actually hasn't found any legitimate threats outside that Sindragosa. Whoa. Letting his opponent keep the gadget to him. Letting him keep the gadget stand.
That is bold.
I don't know.
For 2 damage?
Yeah. Which he could, I mean, he didn't prioritize damage before because he missed 2 damage, so. Prep for sure. It's going to be useless otherwise.
Curious why Tom fanned first there, because 3 mana is the maximum you're always going to be able to save with preparation. So he could have just prepped Fan, and then he ended up only saving 2 mana with his prep by getting rid of the 3 mana card from his hand initially.
Did he have the Fan first before he drew prep?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it was the natural draw off that turn. I could be wrong.
Okay. Yeah, in that case, then that's a really good question. So Tom has also tested pretty much for every spell or every secret outside of just attacking the face. So he's about to find out this is not. Oh, okay. Yeah, he can't attack the 2-1. So it's basically Ice Barrier or Vaporize as the last 2.
It's Godfrey. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm just take solace in the fact that this is really funny for everyone in the world that isn't you.
There's no more spells to draw.
I'm almost out of cards.
Tom is actually still pretty close to killing. He has 3 damage this turn, set his opponent down to 14, and then Leroy Shadow Step attack is 13.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, like Tom not being able to get 1 damage in last turn with the dagger is putting him 1 turn away. Unless there's a last card in the deck that we're not thinking about. Is it the last Valderai Spider?
No, I think he played both. It might be second SI. Did he use a first SI already this game?
Yeah, it really depends on what that last card is.
But again, with that 1 damage breakpoint that you brought up, you know, did the 2-1 have to be killed on the previous turn? Was there more value in just swinging to face with the dagger and leaving that 2-1 in play?
Right, and of course, this could all be trivialized if his opponent has a Death Knight, but I feel like his opponent had chances to play it before.
Yeah.
When there was only a couple minions on board.
Choose soon. So many I'm out of cards.
It is that last spider ambush.
Spider, yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking if it was the other actual Valderai
Oh,
yeah. That makes sense, yeah.
So Tom says that... Wait, actually, this is a little bit weird by Tom. He knows his opponent has every spell possible. But given that Tower Creeper was also added to the AoE, I think that was just completely it. Tom not able to get maximum damage as his Eviscerates, not be able to utilize Cold Blood to go face. All those decisions racked up to just not enough damage. And that's going to be the series.